Hey, this is Jared, and today, I'm going to be decorating my Christmas tree, and we're going to be talking about its origins and the history behind it. Let's get to it. Alright, this one's the winner. We're geared up, ready to go. Alright, so I've got my Christmas tree here that I'm about to build, and it is just a normal, average, ordinary, fake tree. We don't go out and buy a real tree, at least not my wife and I, because we live in this tiny apartment, and I don't think we have the space, the head clearance to really get a 6 or an 8 foot, fir or something like that. I think it's worth noting I used to live on a Christmas tree farm, and so I'm very accustomed to real trees. But and I think some of my family members, if you're watching this video, you can attest to that. Like, we had real trees for a pretty substantial amount of time, and it just is interesting because I did all that stuff, right, bagging and shaking, and for a small amount of time. But really, the reality is there aren't a lot of real Christmas tree farms out here in West Texas, Central Texas, and so it just is what it is. Like, this is a good option. And so I like the smell, but maybe what I'm going to try and do is just put a little, I don't know, air freshener or something on it, like a pine air freshener, and we'll see what happens. But what I'd really like to do is unpack the history behind this tradition. Why do we put up a tree? What do the different symbols mean, and how can we use that to educate other people about the truth of the gospel message and the personhood of Jesus Christ and what he means to us and our faith. So without further ado, I'm going to start building this tree, and we'll talk to you about the history. So, full disclosure, I was in the editing process of this video, and it's about 3:30 in the afternoon here on Thursday, and so I wanted to get it out. And what ended up happening is, while I was editing, I accidentally deleted 2 very crucial moments right in the middle of this whole thing. And one of those was building the tree, and the other talking about the history behind the tree and its symbolism. So I'm having to go back and refilm that, and I thought it would be helpful to use a smaller tree maybe, as I already did this once, but I'm going to try and recapture the magic of the first time. So as you can see, this tree is a representation, this miniature tree that I have in my hands here, is a representation of a 4 to 6 foot, we build them 8 foot, Douglas firs here in America, and those are probably one of the most popular types of trees, Christmas trees that you see out there. Now, there are a lot of arguments about the Christmas tree as being a pagan tradition, and I wholeheartedly reject that notion, that it has even traces of pagan roots. Now, I will clarify that by saying I understand that many ancient cultures used evergreen leaves, branches, similar to our firs that we use today as our Christmas trees. For example, the Egyptian used palm branches, an evergreen green palm branch, as their symbol of health and life, and trying to evoke or invite the more summer gods, I suppose, the sun, for example, back to power and reject the power of winter. And so we know that there are things that were adopted by other cultures. Pagan cultures, for example, used to use evergreen branches as to ward against witches and things like that. But there is no semblance of that left, in my opinion, by my estimation and in my research, to the trees that we use today. And the reason being is I really truly believe this is a uniquely German 16th and 17th century development. Specifically a Christian development, and I'll tell you why. This is, of course, the time that Martin Luther was alive, but also continuing over into when the Lutheran church was becoming more popular, especially in the 17th century, reaching into the 18th century. But it started with Martin Luther. There's actually two different things that I think are going on here. As far as my research was concerned, it turned up these two different kind of rationales for why the modern Christmas tree exists. And the first was this. It was a story about Martin Luther himself, who, it said anecdotally, was walking back to his house one evening. And he was passing through a heavily wooded area. And as he was walking and he was looking at the woods and the night sky, he saw the stars twinkling among the branches. And he thought of God's beauty in the nature around him. And so, enwrapped by that beauty, he instinctively chopped down a fir tree and brought it back home. And he installed either a candle or many candles, lit candles among the branches, and to symbolize the twinkling of the stars, but also to symbolize the beauty of nature and God's creation. So it was a beautiful symbolism that he was trying to encapsulate there. The other thing that was potentially led to this were the combining of two different German traditions around this, Christian traditions around the same time. The first of which was our current Tannenbaum, our Christmas tree, as an extension of the tree of life, the paradise tree, which is their representation of the tree of good and evil, with the fruit tree in the Garden of Eden. And so what would happen is they had a tree, much like we do today, and they would hang or insert apples to represent the fruit of that, to represent God's perfect nature, and also to remember the Garden of Eden. The second tradition is the Christ candle, or the light candle, and this was to represent the light of the world that was born in the Christ child Jesus. And so these two traditions of a pyramid, wooden pyramid structure that had tinsel around it in this light, and then the candle, and then it was lit, combined with the tradition of the tree, the paradise tree, that had apples. We can notice that the apples transformed over time into glass balls, and we notice that the idea of the candle from the Christ candle idea, the light idea, combined with this to create the lights that we put on the tree. Now, I suppose that my reading and understanding of this is that this was mostly or almost exclusively a German practice throughout the 16th and 17th centuries. And it wasn't until it kind of got disseminated into the rest of Europe that it became popular. Of course, the Americans over here wholeheartedly rejected, because of the Puritan tradition, these symbols which were regarded as counter to the Christian message, and so it was largely rejected, this concept of the Christmas tree and the other traditions that were held by the Germans for most of that time. However, when a very popular queen in England, I think it was Victoria, I read, adopted this and put up a Christmas tree and put up the lights and put the apples on the tree, all of a sudden it became very popular in Europe, especially in England and in the surrounding areas, partly because of the popularity of the queen, and so it became kind of commonplace. And as soon as it became commonplace in England, the fashion-forward East Coast especially was early to adopt that practice as well. Of course, in Europe, these fir trees, were maybe 4 foot. I would say much shorter than the trees that we have here in America. I lived on a Christmas tree farm for a time, and we were shaking down and bagging 6 and 8 foot Douglas fir trees that are much bigger than this little pup here. But if you can imagine, that was we had to do it bigger and better here in America as soon as we did adopt the practice. So the Lutheran congregations, especially the German folks that immigrated here over that span of time, also brought with them this custom of the Christmas tree. And its symbolism, the light of hope that is in the Christ child, who is Jesus, and as well as the other symbolism that is rooted in our Christian faith. So that's just a little bit of history behind why this exists, and especially the symbolism behind the different things that we put on the tree, the lights especially, and the glass ornaments that represent the apples from the original Tannenbaum. So there you go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get back to the big tree, and I'm sorry we lost the footage of me building it, but I'm just going to wrap some lights and we're going to have a good time. Here we go. Well, looks like I got some of my decorating done. I've still got a lot to go, but anyway, I hope that this was informative for you. You learned a little bit about the history behind why we do Christmas trees and where they came from Germany during Luther's time, and to symbolize the light of the world coming to us in the form of the babe, Jesus Christ. And so I would be curious, like I do this Christmas tree every year. My wife and I, we decorate it. We put stuff up. We put on gifts under the tree, and we do everything, right? And so as do our families. But I would be curious, what do you do? What are your traditions on Christmas? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, go in peace.